Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Gary, thanks very much for a kind introduction. I now know that it's probably not a good idea to have lunch with you before I speak. The first thing on my outline to share with you is 30,000 participants, 8,000. It's just already taken the applause line from my speech. Thanks a lot, Gary. So let me first of all thank you all for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. And I know that you're going to hear from Ann and Brandon Willis and a number of other folks from USDA in more specific detail. But I think it is important for you all to understand the context as to why it's important for organics to advance and why it's important for USDA to take a role in helping organics advance. There are a multitude of reasons that you all could articulate far better than I could about the importance of organics, but I put it in the context of a point that Gary made, which is the state of the rural economy. The United States Department of Agriculture not only has responsibility for agriculture, in a broader sense, it has responsibility for rural America. And rural America is a special place with special people, people who care deeply about their families and their communities and their country, people who disproportionately contribute back to their country in the form of military service and volunteerism. It is the place where most of our food comes from, a good deal of our water is impacted, most of our domestically produced energy. It's an important place, and it deserves attention, and it deserves a focus. But sadly, we've seen over the course of many, many years, rural America becoming a forgotten part of America. And the result of it is that today, despite the fact that this economy has produced over 9 million new jobs in the last 50 months, not a single new net job has been created in rural America. Sadly, we deal with poverty, and we discuss poverty in the context of the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty. The poverty in rural America is deep and persistent. And in fact, of the over 700 counties in this country that are persistently poor with poverty rates above 20%, over 500 of them are located in rural America. And for the first time in our history, rural America has lost population. Not as a percentage of the overall population, but in real terms, which means that sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters are moving away from rural communities and heading elsewhere for opportunity. So it is incumbent on the United States Department of Agriculture, in charge and in part focused on rural America, to try to improve the opportunities in rural America. And that requires, in my view, a new attitude towards what I refer to as a natural resource economy. Because at the end of the day, that's what rural America has. It has natural resources, and historically it has been the centerpiece of its economy. But it needs to expand beyond the traditional reliance on production agriculture and exports, as important in my view as that is. It needs to be complemented with local and regional food systems that create opportunities for small and mid-sized operators to have a market in which they're not necessarily competing based on overall efficiency or quality or quantity, but that they have a personal relationship with their customer, an opportunity to bargain for a fair market price for their product. And it's important for us to look at conservation differently, not just for the sake of improving soil and water quality, which is important in and of itself, but does it create new market opportunities to essentially market the conservation benefits to regulated industries who would, in other words, or in other worlds and other times, would have used money to build gray infrastructure to take and remove contaminants, now can basically invest in conservation and have the same conservation impact, but put more resources into the rural economy. And is there a way in which we can create higher value opportunities in rural America through the bioeconomy, basically using agricultural waste products to produce new bio-based products, reducing our reliance and our over-reliance on fossil fuels and a fossil fuel economy. This is the challenge for USDA. And organics is one aspect of this opportunity to build a new rural economy, because there's no question it's a high value-added proposition. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into producing an organic product. There is a growing market for those products, and they demand a higher price. Fair enough. So it is incumbent on USDA to be engaged in understanding this opportunity. And when I was here last, I was encouraged to look at organic and for USDA to look at organic as if it were, in essence, its own commodity, which is why we started the Organic Literacy Initiative, an effort to educate people at USDA about this value-added proposition. And honestly, if you had told me a year ago that 30,000 people at USDA would be engaged in this initiative, I would have said, let's reduce that number a bit. That's a pretty high goal. But I'm proud of the fact that 30,000 folks at USDA stepped up and became educated about organics. And I'm very proud of the fact that 8,000 folks decided to go to the next level, to take a more advanced course. This, over time, educates the career workforce at USDA, and over time will result in a variety of decisions that we can't even estimate that will impact positively the organic industry. We've created an organic guide to give people a sense of all of the opportunities that exist at ams.usda.gov/organicsinfo, and would encourage folks to use that guide to show the commitment that USDA has to organics. I want to talk about 4 separate areas today briefly, then a couple of challenges, and then a request. And I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. They just didn't give me enough time today, which I think is a good sign. But I'll try to go through this quickly. We wanted to target our efforts in organic. And so it began with a relatively small but important commitment to helping folks receive the certification that they need to be considered organic. $750 was the cost share assistance. That's been increased and doubled to $1,500. That's helped over 9,000 producers learn more about the next step in the certification process. That's 9,000 producers that were helped financially. We've helped over 6,000 organic producers access EQIP conservation resources to be able to do a better job of conserving the soil and the water. But the real challenge for us was to figure out ways in which we could reduce the risk associated with organic production. Organic producers are not different in terms of the risk that Mother Nature creates for production. You know, I've been explaining to people who have concerns about the ways in which we are supportive of producers why this is important. You see, farming, as you all probably know, is a very risky business. You could be absolutely the greatest farmer in the world. You could do everything right. You could plant at the right time, you could use the right seed, you could cultivate it properly, and Mother Nature could come along with a drought, a tornado, a hurricane, a storm, and wipe out the entire crop. For organic producers, there's an even greater risk because of that high value proposition. So one of the things that we began to do was to take a look at our risk management tools and decide, are they appropriate for organic? Is organic slightly different than commodity production? And what we found was that many organic producers have that personal relationship, that contract, if you will, with their purchasers, and that contract price really defines the value of what it is that they're producing. So our risk management folks went about changing the way in which this crop insurance opportunity could be adjusted to the organic proposition. And so for 62 crops, we now have a price selection system based on the contract price. Now, that may not seem like that big a deal, but $45 million was paid in premiums last year, but organic producers collected $74 million in payments. So for organic producers, for those who receive those payments, it may be the difference between being in business or not being in business. But we realized that that in and of itself was not enough, that we didn't really have a policy that was really focused on the producer that was producing multiple crops, that had a diversified agricultural operation, that may have had 2 or 3 or 4 crops growing at the same time, and that our crop insurance and risk management system just didn't really respond to that type of operation. So today we are announcing the establishment of a pilot program in which we will be offering for those diversified farming operations what we refer to as a whole farm policy. Now, it's going to be available in most states in the country where there is at least some actuarial information that would allow us to provide this new policy. And it plays to the strengths of organic producers. It plays to the strength of specialty crop producers. It creates a new opportunity to reduce risk. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important from the producer's standpoint because it keeps them in business. But it's also important because it reduces the risk of farming to the point where people will stay in the business of farming. That may not seem like that big a deal, but in this country we are food secure. We produce just about everything we need to feed our people. That's not true in most countries in the world. Most countries depend on someone else for their food. It is a national security advantage that we have in this country, that we have because we keep people, we reduce the risk of farming to the point where people stay in the business of farming. And that's important. And it's important for organic producers. Brandon Willis is going to have a breakout session later today, and I would encourage those who are interested in this new risk management tool to go to that breakout session, because Brandon will tell you far more about this pilot than I'll be able to tell you. But the bottom line is this is a new opportunity, and it's an indication of the importance that we place on organic, that we have had price election based on contracts, and that we create a new policy designed to meet the needs of specialty crop producers and organic producers. The second area that we focused on at USDA is research and data. Our market news already covers 250 products, which gives you information about what the market is, which helps folks like Gary and Walter who are purchasing organic product to kind of know where the price is. That helps their business, in turn helping organic producers. Well, we want to expand on that number. And so this year we're going to be focusing a concerted effort to expand the market news effort in organics, which is another indication of the importance that we place on this industry. We also want to continue to do the job of research. I shared with Walter and Gary earlier today that we've already invested, since I've been Secretary, $160 million in additional research focused on organic. One of the great things about the Farm Bill, and I know that you honored Senator Stabenow earlier today, and well-deserved it is, but in that Farm Bill, she and we encouraged the Congress to include a commitment each and every year in the Farm Bill, in the baseline, that would commit up to $20 million of resources for an organic research initiative. That in and of itself is important because it is money that doesn't have to be appropriated every year. It's guaranteed. That's really significant. It's in the baseline, so future farm bills will allow that to continue. And it creates an extension of these resources beyond just research to now include extension and education. It's an opportunity to use resources to get the word out to a larger audience. That's pretty significant. When you combine that with the checkoff opportunity that the industry may take advantage of, you have a real opportunity to significantly expand the knowledge base about organics. That's important. We also, the third issue is we also focused on marketing and infrastructure. When we negotiate equivalency agreements on a trade basis with Canada, the EU, and Japan, what that essentially does is it simplifies trade. It doesn't require dual certifications and dual inspections and a very costly set of steps. It allows a freer flow of goods and of trade. We estimate in the Japanese equivalency agreement that it could grow that market to $250 million, which would be a tripling in the next 10 years. Expanded market opportunity, but we're not stopping there. We're engaged in very serious conversations with the South Koreans. And just on Monday, when I was in Mexico City, it wasn't on the list of talking points that folks put together, but I injected in my discussions with Secretary Martinez the need for us to have concrete discussions about equivalency with Mexico. I know our team at Foreign Ag, and Phil is here, he can probably give you more information about this, But our team has been engaged in conversations with the Mexicans. But I emphasize the importance of this to Mexico and to the United States, that we have an equivalency agreement. If we can reduce the friction at the border, it opens up new market opportunities for their producers and for our producers. So we are invested in creating market opportunity. While this is not specifically targeted to organic, it does impact organic market opportunities. The significant investment that we at USDA have made in local and regional food systems. Farmers market promotion money increased. Local food promotion created for the first time in the Farm Bill. The Business and Industry Loan Guarantee Program, now a guarantee of 5% of that resource every single year, has got to be invested in advancing local and regional food systems and food hubs. The tunnel houses, over 13,000 have been assisted through USDA to extend growing seasons for specialty crops. The Specialty Crop Block Grant, which was increased in this Farm Bill. The use of the electronic benefit transfer system with our SNAP program to expand opportunities for SNAP beneficiaries and WIC beneficiaries to go to farmers markets and local markets and redeem their benefits at those local markets, expanding new opportunities and new market opportunities. In over 4,000 farmers markets, we now have this EBT capacity. It opens up market opportunities for millions of potential consumers. Our small help desk, which is fielding around 10,000 questions each and every year for smaller producers, many of whom are in the specialty crop and organic world. The interstate meat rule. There are a variety of steps that this USDA has taken to expand the local and regional food system because we see that as a complement to the traditional agriculture. We see it as a way of enhancing economic opportunity, bringing entrepreneurship into rural America, encouraging innovation, and providing an opportunity for younger people who are interested in farming to be able to start without having to buy 1 million acres of land. It's extremely important that we get young people engaged in farming. We have 7 times the number of farmers over the age of 65 in this country than we have under the age of 35. So there has to be a real focus, and there will be, over the course of the next several years, at looking at ways in which we can encourage young people to get into this business, returning veterans, with a specific focus, because many of these folks come from rural areas that we give them an opportunity to return back home. The fourth and final area that we are focused on is a general service. How can we continue to assist this industry? And one of the things we can do is make sure that we protect the brand. The brand is the high value added proposition. It's what really allows organic producers and the sellers of organic product to charge just a little bit more because there is a guarantee associated with that product. So we have done 260 investigations in the last year. We have had a series of violations that have been enforced. We are looking at foreign audits to make sure that the brand is protected. We will continue to make a commitment to you and to producers to do what we can to protect the brand. And I think you will see that with our efforts with the Standards Board. Now, there's a great opportunity that the industry must really think hard and long about, which is the checkoff opportunity. We can't start it. We can't initiate it. We can't propose it. It's got to come from you. It's got to come from the industry. It's obviously helpful if it's a consensus position. But this is an enormous opportunity that the Farm Bill has created, and the industry should take advantage of it. However you want to structure it, however you want to deal with it, you should take advantage of it because it can literally put resources behind research and marketing and do it in a very collaborative and participatory way. The challenges. Climate. Serious problem with climate change in this country. And I'm not talking about the fact that there's some people who think the climate's not changing. What I am talking about is the fact that we need more information, more knowledge about the impact of a changing climate on productions of all kinds, which is why we established 7 climate change hubs around the country, regionally located, in an effort to try to make sure that we know precisely what's being grown and raised and what's happening in our forests in each region of this country, getting a vulnerability assessment of each region, determining how changing climates, increasing temperatures are and will impact in the long-term production, and then providing research and knowledge about technologies and techniques that will allow us to better adapt and mitigate to the consequences of a changing climate. We also have 3 sub-hubs, one of which is in California, taking a look at very specific issues relating to agriculture. We will be engaged, not just here in the United States with a focus on climate change, but we have also been one of the instituting countries in a development of an alliance for smart agriculture, an opportunity for us to have an international conversation and discussion about how we, as an industry writ large, will be in a better position to make and to improve productivity, to make agriculture more resilient to a changing climate, and to look at ways in which we can reduce and perhaps even eliminate greenhouse gas emissions affiliated and connected to agriculture. Walter and Gary asked me about the AC21 program. I want you to know that we are following through on the recommendations of that committee. We are putting out an organic production survey that will do a better job of assessing precisely how many incidences there may have been where organic production was interfered with or where difficulties occurred as a result of what perhaps a neighbor was doing. We are focused on making sure our seed banks are protecting the integrity of our seed. We have used some of our biotechnology risk assessment grants to look at issues raised by the AC21 committee. We have reestablished the National Genetic Resource Advisory Committee, and we are doing extensive research on the issue of drift, starting with alfalfa. So we are following up with AC21, and we will continue to do so. The last challenge that I want to talk about very briefly. I care deeply about kids, and you know, you would expect anybody in my position to say that. I think I care deeply about kids because I started out life in a Catholic orphanage. The one thing I know pretty much about myself is that I was well fed in that orphanage. I know that because I have a picture of my first day in my adopted home, and I was a very plump little kid. I was told by my parents that they picked me out of the orphanage based on my plumpness, on the theory that that must have meant that I was a healthy kid. The reality is I've struggled with my weight all my life. It is not an easy struggle. And so my heart goes out to the 30% or so of our youngsters in this country who are obese or are at risk of being obese, who are overweight, and dealing with the consequences of that in terms of their self-image. It is real. It is significant. I've never really been hungry. You know, I may have been on a diet, and I may have thought I was hungry, but I've never really experienced real hunger. I doubt too many people in this room have really experienced real hunger. But the reality is there's 17 million children in this country, the greatest nation on earth, the most powerful nation on earth, with the largest economy on earth, 17 million kids who live in food insecure homes, which means at some point in time in the month, mom and or dad are making some tough calls in terms of what's going to be fed and who's going to be fed. That is the reason why we spent time and effort to improve the place where government can help through the school lunch and breakfast programs. We had passed the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act without a single dissenting vote in the Senate, United States Senate in 2010. And in that Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, we made a commitment to improve the quality and nutritional value of the foods that we would be feeding to our children, to the 30 million youngsters who are in schools today who participate in school lunch, the 13 million kids today who participate in school breakfast. It was a simple proposition, science-based. Institute of Medicine came in with a set of recommendations. It suggested kids needed more fruits and vegetables. They needed more low-fat dairy. They needed more access to whole grains. And they frankly needed less access to fat and sodium and sugar. A simple proposition. Not simple to implement, but a commitment to the next generation of Americans that we would do everything we could in the context of the school programs to ensure that they were provided access to healthy foods. And for a couple of years, we've been instituting this program, and we just had a recent study from Harvard, which points out that kids indeed are eating more fruits and vegetables. We have another study that suggests that this notion that somehow there's been massive food waste at schools is not correct. But now we have an effort on the part of some to back away from that commitment to our children, to suggest that it's just too hard to do this. It's just too difficult to do this. Well, the reality is if we don't do this, then we're saying to the 30% of our kids who are obese or at risk of being obese, we're not going to be there to help you. We're going to say to the 17 million youngsters who live in food insecure homes, we're not going to do our level best to ensure that at least at some point in time during the day, if times are tough at home, you're going to get something decent to eat. Now, I, for one, think it is outrageous that we are taking a step back from that commitment we made to America's children. It was the right thing to do in 2010. It's the right thing to do in 2012, and it's the right thing to do in 2014 and beyond. And it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with organic, but you all have voices. You all have connections. You all have power at home and here. And if you don't use your voice, if you don't use your power to convey a sense of outrage at the fact that we want to take a step back from this solemn commitment we've made to our children, then those who are interested in taking a step back will win in that building right up there. And it will mean a sadder day for the 30 million kids who need this. It will mean that those kids who we know will perform better in school, we know will have better health outcomes, we know will have brighter and better futures, will be relegated to sort of doing it on their own. And I can tell you, as a guy who's been trying to do it on his own for 63 years, it is not easy. It is tough. It is hard. And I've had all the benefits, all the advantages in life anybody could have. So it is a challenge that this group, apart from all the other issues you want to talk about, you ought to be engaged in that issue, and you ought to be forcefully engaged in it. The last thing I will say before I open it up to questions is I started with a concern about the rural economy, and I will end with that. We're doing everything we can at USDA to figure out ways in which we can encourage more investment in this four-pronged strategy to improve the economy of rural America. So on July 23rd and 24th, we're going to sponsor a conference here in Washington, D.C., the first of its kind. The first time we will ever bring investment bankers, venture capitalists, folks who have substantial amount of money in this economy to Washington, D.C. and challenge them to look at opportunities that exist in rural America and to challenge them to invest in those opportunities so that we can turn the corner on job growth and creation in rural America, that we can continue to encourage more capital investment in local and regional food systems, that we can reduce the poverty rate in those persistently poor areas, and that we can create real opportunities so that sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters can have an opportunity to return home if they so choose. I want to extend an invitation to all those who believe that a local and regional food system is an appropriate way for investment, for all those who believe food hubs are important to aggregate locally produced food so it can be packaged and processed and marketed appropriately. I want to encourage you to look at opportunities to participate in this conference. It's a two-day conference. The second day will be an opportunity for panels to talk about deals and opportunities that exist. One of those panels will be, and I'm making this commitment today. Where's Eleanor Starmer? Is she here? Eleanor, here's the commitment. You can take it back to the boys who are setting this conference up. We'll have a panel on local and regional food systems, and we'll encourage folks to look at the investment opportunities for that, because that will help create new market opportunities for the people that you care specifically about, the organic producers of this country. And if we work together, we can provide a better and brighter day, not just for rural Americans, but also for America's children. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to take questions.
Sorry, you can pick.
No, go ahead. No, you're in charge. You pick. That way, when the last question's picked, it's your fault, not mine.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much, not only for what you have done for the organic community, but for rural America and agriculture in general. Your last 2 points were really important. This issue of poverty, I think our industry has to get a lot more engaged in it. I think we need as much encouragement as we possibly can to work with you and with everyone to lift those 30 million out of poverty and where they have a square meal every day. I wanted to get to 2 other points. One is the whole existence of coexistence. As you know, this is a very challenging matter for us. And if you could just update us a little bit more on where we are in coming to some conclusion on how we will remedy the issue of coexistence, because with 98% corn and soybeans, it's going to be really hard to protect the organic community from organic. And the last point is a challenge in adding to your climate change issues. I think water is going to be a much more important issue than fuel. And I'd like to know what we're doing about really dealing with water resource management from the standpoint of retention, better utilization, and availability.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me answer the second question first, because I think I can answer it very quickly. 2 specific things we've announced in just the last 6 months. One relates to our forests. The reality is, particularly in the western part of the United States, the U.S. forest land basically impacts the water resources for 60 million Americans who live in that part of the country. We have just recently proposed a set of guidelines as part of our overall forest planning process that really requires the management and maintenance of our forests to take into consideration the impact on water resources. First time we've ever really been that specific in the management guidelines for the way in which we are dealing with our forests. Frankly, we could go so much further on that issue if Congress will work with us and if we work with Congress to create a new way of funding fire suppression, because these fires are so expensive and there are more of them. We've already had 23,140 fires this year. 23,000. And frankly, we'll have at least 40 to 50,000 and maybe as high as 70 to 100,000 fires that we fight. But we have a very arcane way of paying for fire suppression, which is robbing money from our restoration and resiliency resources, which impacts our capacity to have our forests be better reservoirs of water. The second second step we've taken is to establish a challenge grant of $30 million to the university community, $6 million a year for 5 years, to give us a better handle on ways in which we can improve significantly the management of water resources in the context of drought and difficulties that we're now experiencing. Our hope is that this will identify more effective ways and ways in which we can utilize water resources more efficiently and more effectively. I also believe the climate change hubs will probably also address this issue. So we are focused on this. We understand it's an issue, and it's a huge issue, and it's a huge issue globally. Part of the Global Research Alliance is looking at this issue. The Climate Smart Alliance that I talked about, certainly that will be an issue. On the issue of coexistence, I think the first thing we have to do is to do right by the recommendations the DAC 21 committee put forward. That's why we're doing analysis of drift. That's why we're developing whole farm policies. That's why we are creating grant programs under the Biotechnology Risk Assessment Program to look at better ways to create an environment of coexistence. It's why we're working with seed companies to better define what stewardship responsibilities folks have. This is ongoing, and it's a continual effort. I don't believe that I'm ever going to change anyone's mind. I talk to 2 separate groups. I talk to you folks, and then I talk to the biotech folks. And I don't know that I'm ever going to change anybody's mind. I may be a minority of 1 here. But, and this is a much larger concern, so I apologize. You've asked the wrong question today, sir. This country has created an environment in which polarization is popular. in which problem solvers are not in demand. What's in demand are people that can make statements that get attention, that draw people apart, and don't bring people together. Now, I appreciate the fact that organic producers and my good friends Gary and Walter were willing to engage in a conversation that led to the AC21 committee. Now, they got a lot of grief for that, which is unfortunate because they're trying and we're trying to find that elusive middle ground that will allow producers to do what they think is best and to do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize someone else's capacity to do what they think is best. It is a difficult proposition, but I am committed to it. And as long as I'm secretary, we're going to do everything we can with the powers and resources we have to encourage folks to get along, understanding that we're never going to try to convince you that there aren't serious issues with the way in which others choose to farm, and never believing that we're going to convince the other side that they need to make room for this high value-added proposition. I honestly think it's important for agriculture to create a world and an environment in which coexistence exists, and here's why. I don't think the 99% of America that doesn't farm understands where their food comes from. Now, you all will interpret that potentially a little bit differently than I'm interpreting it, but I'm just looking at these people. I don't care what kind of production process they go through. All I know is every single year they put their life and their livelihood at risk to things they can't control. And oftentimes to markets that they have little control over. And they do it, and they do it well. The organic producers in this country are extraordinary. The agricultural production is extraordinary. And it has actually created an environment in which the other 99% that don't farm have the freedom to do whatever it is we want to do with our lives. 100 years ago, when farming was subsistence, when a substantial percentage of the population was still living in rural America, if you didn't farm, if you didn't grow it, your family might not be fed. You didn't have the luxury of thinking, well, yeah, gosh, I think I'd like to be a lawyer. Or, you know, I kind of like to be the owner of an organic yogurt making company. You didn't have that opportunity because you were struggling to stay alive. But American agriculture, criticize whatever you want, however you want to phrase it, American agriculture has freed the rest of us up to have those opportunities. I don't have to worry about I don't have to farm, thank God. My family would starve if it was up to me to farm. But I also have to appreciate the convenience that I now have that I go to Walter's grocery store and I pick up some groceries. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's 45 minutes, an hour, especially if you can improve the parking. Oh, no, it's not a matter. It's convenient. It's great. It frees me up to do other things. We never say thank you. We're always complaining about one aspect of farming or another, or criticizing this or that. Maybe just someday we could say, okay, leaving aside all the concerns we have, leaving aside all the issues that divide us, geez, maybe one day we could just say, golly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to consider other options with my life. I'm telling you, folks, there are other parts of the world where that's not the case. And so I'm committed to coexistence for that reason, because I want people to know I appreciate what they do. I appreciate the risks that they take. I know they care deeply about whatever production process they're engaged in. And I know they're underappreciated also, whatever production process they use. Totally underappreciated in this country. Yes? I'm assuming people are keeping a track of time. Okay.
of course, thank you for all the work, all the programs, but let me just cut to the other side of the compliments, and get to the question, and that is two things. One, would you agree to that USDA would finalize a research and promotion program by the end of the administration if the industry comes to you with one? And then two, I'm totally fine with coexistence, but why is the idea of an adequate buffer requirement end up affecting only organic farmers when they must take the responsibility to avoid either chemical and or genetic trespass? And shouldn't the responsibility of that be on the patent holder of the technology? And furthermore, isn't it a problem when the idea of the companies that own the technology then by potentially crop insurance companies to then have premiums paid by, potentially, organic farmers, but the claims and the premiums to support that really are externalized to the public?
Good questions. We'll do everything we possibly can to institute every provision of the Farm Bill as quickly as we possibly can and do it before this administration is over. I would anticipate, and I'm now going to commit Ann and her team to doing this, and she's going to send me an email going, what in the... but, if we get a request, we'll work it through our process and we'll do it in a timely and appropriate way, and hopefully we can get this done. It does depend on what the request is. It does depend on, how producers view the request, the votes, and all that kind of stuff, but we'll do everything we possibly can to get it done. But your question raises, I think, a more important point, which is that it is important for us to institutionalize these changes. This can't just be because you have a particular secretary or particular president or particular group in charge of USDA. There needs to be a rooting and an institutionalization of what we're trying to do here. And that's the beauty of some of the things that have been done in the Farm Bill, is that creates a 5-year opportunity for us to root this research and extension effort. If you have a check off, that becomes very difficult to change once you have it in place. So the focus is going to be not just implementing, but making sure we do it in a right way that allows this good work to continue. Now, on the issue of coexistence and risk management, I would say the first step in the process, which is not going to satisfy you, and I acknowledge that, is to begin a conversation with seed companies and with producers who are using other technologies and other approaches to really understand what their stewardship responsibility is. That's the first step, because until you establish what the standard of practice is and what the standard ought to be, it's really difficult to hold somebody accountable. It's very difficult to hold somebody accountable. You've got to establish, I'm talking from a legal perspective. You've got to establish a standard. And that's what discussions about stewardship is all about. It's establishing the standard so that it will be easier to determine whether the standard was met or not met in a particular circumstance. It's also important to do the research that allows you to understand the mechanics of what could lead to compromising your crop. It's not as simple as it sounds, and we're learning that from the alfalfa research that we're doing. It just is really complicated. So if you don't get the science right and you don't establish the standard, it's going to be really hard to hold anybody accountable. So to me, it's establishing the foundation and understanding that over time, as organics grow, as organics expand. Remember, organic production today is 1% of producers. It's less than 1%. If you do certified producers, it's 18,000 certified producers out of 2.3 million. Really small percentage. It's 1% of the farmland. I'll say it's 4 to 5% of sales, but Walter will tell me, but it may be as high as 10% on some other product. But the reality is it's still a relatively small percentage of the overall picture, right? So you got to lay the foundation. And you got to make sure that foundation is laid properly and scientifically based, and that's what we're trying to do. It takes time, and I understand that people are impatient, and I understand that people want it to move more quickly. But if you move more quickly, you may end up not having the standard, you may not have the science, and you may find yourself in worse shape than you're in today. wrap it up.
Mr. Secretary, I understand we're out of time.
All right. Thank you all very much.